Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. I just spent a ton of time talking about it. It is SEC Media Days. There is a ton going on. And as I just said a moment ago, we've had some of the biggest names in college football to this point speak. I'm recording late Tuesday. Nick Saban already took the podium early Tuesday. Brian Kelly took the podium in his first appearance at SEC Media Days on Monday. Mike Leach did his Mike Leach thing on Tuesday. But for those of you who follow this event, the opening of this event always surrounds SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey. He kind of gives his State of the Union address. Talks about all sorts of things, and this year it was obviously especially interesting and important. He talked a lot about the present of NIL, what is going on with NIL. He actually talked about where he was with when the USC-UCLA news dropped. I thought that was very interesting. He actually said that he did not call a meeting immediately after the USC-UCLA news because he didn't want people thinking that he was making a countermove. So a lot of really interesting things from Greg Sankey. But what I thought came out of SEC Media Days, and specifically Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, his State of the Union address, I believe that he had two very interesting quotes which speak to the present and future of college football. And I believe this. As I've said for a couple weeks, I believe that we are headed towards a sport of consolidation. I believe we're headed towards a sport where fewer teams matter. I believe we're headed towards a sport based on some of the stuff that Greg Sankey said this week that is not going to look anything like what we currently know. And I think we're certainly headed for a postseason that does not look like anything that we currently know. Before we get to what Greg Sankey said, I do think specifically from the postseason, because the postseason is kind of the center point and the focal point of everything going on. And I really want to take a step back and kind of remind you of something that came up last year because, of course, I think it contextualizes what Greg Sankey said on Monday at SEC Media Day. Go back to a little past this time last year. If you remember this time last year, obviously Texas, Oklahoma to the SEC was the big news. But then after that, it became the next conversation of, okay, what does that mean for the college football playoff? And it was about a year ago, I believe really the last time that anybody met to talk about the present and future of the college football playoff was January. And at the time, Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, really pushed for a 12-team playoff that included 6 automatic bids and 6 at-larges. Keep in mind, right now we have a 4-team playoff. Everybody knows that. And I think it's important to remember this one fact because Greg Sankey discussed it on Monday. Right now, the college football playoff has 4 teams, and they're really 4 at-large teams, right? You don't get, even the SEC champ doesn't automatically get a bid to the college football playoff. It's just the SEC champ always gets in, usually the same with the Big Ten, usually the same with the ACC or the Big 12, whatever. But right now, the college football playoff is set at 4 teams. Everybody is an at-large team. So Greg Sankey, in the most recent conversations about the college football playoff, said that he believed the best path forward was 12 teams with 6 automatic qualifiers and 6 at-large teams. And if you really think about it at its most basic level, now I've never been an expand the playoff guy, but if you think about it at its most basic level, it kind of makes sense as to why that would be good. It'd be good for the overall health of college football because 6 automatic bids means that in the days before USC and UCLA left for the Pac-12 would have gotten an automatic bid. So as bad as the league had been, one, they'd get access to that cut of money, that cut of pie in terms of the financial elements of it. But 2, more importantly, they'd get to play on the biggest stage. And so Greg Sankey's argument was, you guys have been boxed out for years. I'm basically giving you a get-out-of-jail-free card, and you're going to make money, and it's going to help us grow this sport. The problem was all of these other conferences really did not want to expand that playoff to 12 with 6 at-large bids and 6 automatic bids for this reason. They knew that with 6 automatic bids and 6 at-larges, Most of those at-larges, if we're being honest, are going to go to the SEC. And I don't think they wanted to give the SEC the upper hand. And let's be honest, I think the biggest fear is you're the Pac-12 champ, you're, whatever, and you have the fourth best team from the SEC come to your place, kick your butt. That the Pac-12 and the Big 12 and the ACC and the Big 10 were like, we don't really want that. Take it a step further, I don't think the Big 10 wanted their champion hosting the fifth best team in the SEC getting their butt kicked, because obviously we know what the ramifications would have been. So Greg Sankey wanted 12 teams, 6 auto bids, 6 at-larges. The other conferences pushed for 8 bids, 5 to 6 automatic bids, and 1 to 2 at-larges. And Greg Sankey's argument was basically like, well, wait a second now. We technically have 4 at-larges right now here in 2021, 2022 with the 4-team playoff. Why are we going to set up a system with fewer at-large bids? That was Greg Sankey's argument. And so everybody went their separate ways and whatever. So why do I bring it up? What does it have to do with this week at SEC Media Days? Well, Greg Sankey was asked about the present and the future of college football playoff, and he basically said, look, everything that we already discussed, now that USC and UCLA are headed to the Big Ten, now that the Pac-12 has less leverage than it did even a year ago, now that the Big 12 has basically no leverage at all without Texas and Oklahoma, we are going to completely revisit that. Here is what he said. He said the pressure was there, this was previously, to have conference access with some guarantee. So the 12-team, 6 at-large, which increases the at-large access, but the guarantee... Okay, here's the important part. He said things have now changed. I was clear back in January when we walked away from that conversation that we as a conference, the SEC, weren't unanimous in our support. I had, as commissioner, moved people forward to the point we were supportive as a league. If we're going to go back to square one, so this is the important part. If we're going to go back to square one, we're going to take a step back from the model that was introduced and rethink the approach, the number of teams, whether there should be any guarantee for conference champions at all. That is not a very good sign if you are not in the SEC and you're not in the Big Ten. Because what Greg Sankey just said right there, I'm going to read it again. If we're going to go back to square one, we're going to take a step back from the model introduced. That was 12 teams, 6 at-larges, 6 automatic bids. We're going to take a step back from the model introduced and rethink the approach, number of teams, whether there should be any guarantee for conference champions at all. Basically, this is what Greg Sankey just said. He said Pac-12, Big 12, AAC, ACC, all you conferences that didn't want to play nice, I tried to throw you a bone. Yeah, the SEC would have gotten the most teams, but guess what? We're the best conference. Yeah, we're going to get more teams, but we deserve to have more teams. But I tried to throw you a bone. I tried to do what was best for college football. I tried to make a national event that included the winner from the West Coast, the Pac-12, the winner from the Atlantic Coast, the ACC, the winner from the Midwest, the Big Ten, the winner from our conference, and then we fill in the blanks from there to fill out a 12-team field. Well, guess what? Now we're going back to square one, and here's the crazy part. Now I, Greg Sankey, have more leverage than I did a year ago. Pac-12, you might not even exist in 10 minutes, so I don't really care what you want. ACC, everybody knows I'm going to get the teams I want out of your conference. The Big Ten's going to go take a few, so you got to listen to me because I'm running the show. To use the old quote, I'm the captain now. That is basically what Greg Sankey just said. And so now, and we're going to get into in a minute what a potential playoff could look like. What he's saying is we're starting from scratch. And I have more power than I ever did. And all these other people, guys and girls that I was trying to appease, I don't really care about them anymore. What I'm committed to are the 16 teams in my league, the 16 teams in the SEC. Here was the other thing that he said that I thought was very interesting, and you had to pay extra close attention to really hear what Greg Sankey said, because he said it was a joke, but here's the thing. When there are billions of dollars at stake, and you're set to collect most of them, is anybody ever really joking? I don't think so. And Greg Sankey was then later asked about the future scheduling model of the SEC in the regular season. This has been a big topic of conversation since Texas and Oklahoma announced they were coming in. And the big debate has been this. Currently, the SEC plays 8 conference games. They play 8 conference games against other SEC teams. And the big debate, and we've talked about it a little bit on this show, do we stay at 8 teams or do we go to 9 games? 9 games would allow 3 games against traditional rivals plus 6 games against everybody else, which means that once every 2 years you would play everybody in the conference, and once every 4 years, every team plays everybody else in their stadium. So the famous thing is Georgia and Texas A&M, I believe, have played one time since Texas A&M joined the SEC in 2012. That changes. They play once every 2 years now and once every 4 years in each venue. So that is the topic of conversation. Do we go to 8? Do we stick with 8 games when Texas and Oklahoma come, or do we go to 9? But here was what Greg Sankey said when he was asked about it. He talks about the coaches' meetings in Destin, and here's what he had to say. When we concluded our discussion in Destin, we had a focus placed on a single division model with the ability to accommodate either an 8 or 9 game conference schedule. I'll wink and say we could even accommodate a 10 game conference schedule. I see all of you look up. I just want to make sure you're paying attention. Smiling. That's actually not our focus. Ho, 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 ho! Greg Sankey, that little jokester. Are we doing 8 or are we doing 9? How about 10? Oh, no, I'm just kidding. Just want to make sure you're paying attention. But here's my question. Were you really kidding, Greg Sankey? Or are you dead serious? Because I don't think that you put that out there just to have fun with the media. I think you do that because you're kind of letting us know. It might not happen today. It might not happen tomorrow. It might not happen for 10 more years until the ACC eventually blows up. But at some point, we're going to 10 conference games. We're going to 10 conference games. Forget 8, forget 9. We already have a model in place when we want to go to 10. Now, naturally, I know what a lot of you are thinking. A lot of you are sitting here thinking, that makes no sense. The first question is, why would we, what is the incentive to go to 10 games? What is the incentive to go to 10 SEC games? Well, what is the incentive in any of this? It's to make the most money possible and share it with the fewest people, or in this case, schools possible. And so why I think we're going to get to 9 SEC games and then eventually 10 is because the SEC is like, I don't really care about subsidizing all these other schools. I don't care about subsidizing the FCS. I don't care about subsidizing the Pac-12. Why let all of those schools come into our stadiums, or we have to travel to their stadiums, play on our TV network, and we got to split the check with them? If you're Greg Sankey and you're the SEC, why do you care about what happens in the ACC? Why do you care what happens in the Pac-12? As a matter of fact, let's be honest. Whether it is an ACC team, whether it is a Pac-12 team, whether it is an AAC team, the biggest game on their schedule is whoever they're playing out of the SEC, at least when it comes to at home. You know what the only sellout that Texas has right now on their schedule? It's Alabama. They've already sold that out. Now, they should have sold it out 2 years ago, but they announced a few weeks ago that's a sellout. That is the biggest game that Texas is going to host in many, many, many years, probably since they hosted LSU a few years ago when LSU had Joe Burrow. So if you're Greg Sankey, you're sitting there saying, why am I going to send all my teams all over the country so that Alabama can go fill up your stadium and sell your tickets and do this and do that? Rather than do that, I'd rather have Alabama, rather than them playing, say, Florida State, which is on their schedule, or West Virginia, which is on their schedule, I'd rather them play South Carolina, or I'd rather them play Vanderbilt. Let 25,000 Alabama fans go up to Nashville, and we keep the money, and we put it on our network, and it's awesome, and all that's good stuff. Now, I think the second question many of you would ask would be, but Torres, if we play 10 conference games, that's going to kill anybody's chances for the playoff. It's going to eliminate possibilities for the postseason because everybody's going to be beating each other, and everybody's going to finish with 2, 3, 4 losses over the course of a season. And what I need you to do, I need you to take off your 2022 thinking cap, and I need you to look forward to 2026, 2028, 2029, 2032, 2033, and go back to what we just talked about. The SEC was already going to dictate the terms of the postseason going forward. Now, with everything that has happened, they have more say than ever before. Now, the Big Ten's going to have a big say too. I'm not trying to disparage Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State and whatever. But the SEC, as much power as they had a year ago, they got even more now because the Pac-12 is weakened. The Big 12 right now is weakened, although we're going to get to it in a minute. I think they're going to take a few of those Pac-12 teams. But the SEC is going to dictate terms of the playoff, of the postseason. So why does the SEC care if they have if their teams have 2, 3, 4 losses? Because at the end of the day, they're sitting there saying, well, we're going to decide what the parameters are. By then, we're going to be leaps and bounds above everybody else except for the Big Ten financially. Our schools are going to be competing on a completely different level. Who knows what NIL looks like by then? I mean, we already have teams now. Texas Tech on Monday announced that every player on the team is getting $25K per person. I mean, imagine what this thing could look like in terms of NIL for the SEC by 2025, 2026. I mean, you could be talking about players making hundreds of thousands of dollars in NIL. And so, when I say players, I don't mean just the star quarterback. I mean everybody on the roster. And so the point that I'm trying to make is, I don't think Greg Sankey cares about, well, this team has 2, 3, 4 losses, because they're going to dictate what the playoff and what the postseason looks like. So is it a 10-team field with 4 from the SEC, 4 from the Big Ten, and 2 from everywhere else? Is it just the top 4 in the SEC play, the top 4 in the Big Ten play, and the winner plays each other? I don't know what that is going to look like. I like to make a lot of predictions. I like to tell you how smart I am, and I'm going to do it a lot in the next 2 segments. That part I don't know because I don't think anybody knows. And by the way, I know nobody knows because if everybody knew what the postseason was going to be, then the Pac-12 would have agreed to the 12-team playoff a year ago, so they weren't in the situation they are now. So I've gone on long enough. I want to take a quick break and come back and talk the Big 12 and the Pac-12 news. But I'm just telling you, Greg Sankey just told you. He just told you what the future of college football is going to look like. It's going to be a lot of the SEC at the top and a lot of the Big Ten at the top, and everybody else is kind of behind. And the sad part is, the ironic part is, whatever term you want to use, we created this playoff to make college football more of a national sport. I think we're headed towards a world where it's probably looking like, I think the power is consolidated. I think it's going to be a Big Ten SEC world, something that we've talked about quite a bit on this show the last few weeks.